why he's not talking to me. She's like, you should send him a message so that way you can see what he reads. And I was like, that's genius. And so I did that.
And I purposefully didn't open it because I knew you could see her on the sheet. No, not dead, only on the inside. So.
Welcome, nerds, to another episode of the Nerd You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses the culture through various segments. My name, of course, is Patrick Kuhn, alongside my co-host, as always, that Tyler Hunt. How's it going, man?
Pretty well, man. A little stressed, but happy to be recording the podcast.
Yeah, I kind of figured throughout the week when you weren't responding to any of my text messages that you were getting a little busy at work. I thought you were dead for a little bit. I'll be real honest.
Yeah. So I was at a work event this weekend that I can't really talk about, but
sure.
Basically, I was scheduled things to do open to close from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed, and there was very little time in between to even have a thought about myself or anything else. So yeah, you were blowing me up pretty hard. And
I got to the point where I was just, and I'm sure you knew this, that I was just sending you random shit just to get your attention.
Yeah, and it was kind of one of those things where you sent me a couple, and I'm like, oh, I need to respond to him. Oh, I need to respond to him. And then it just became, I'm not going to respond to him. And then you kept texting me, and then you sent me a message on Facebook.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right.
Yeah, because it was funny because obviously I was kidding. I don't care. Like, whatever. I was sitting there, Chrissy and I, my wife, we were watching Stranger Things because we were trying to rewatch the first season, which we did. And we were just sitting there, and I was texting you another bit emoji or something and I was kind of giggling to myself as I do because I laugh at my own jokes. And she's like, what's going on? And I was like, and I just told her the story that you had been talking to me all day. And I was like, I'm pretty sure he's dead. And that's the only reasonable explanation for why he's not talking to me. She's like, you should send him a message so that way you can see what he reads. And I was like, that's genius. And so I did that.
And I purposefully didn't open it because I knew you could see her on the sheet. No, not dead, only on the inside. So we're good.
All right, cool, man. So if this is your first episode, we'd like to start off with each episode by kind of just checking in with each other. We call it what we're into. So what are you into this week?
This week, I was really into being stressed and sleep deprived.
Okay, cool.
So that made it a hard week to kind of find something to talk about. So I actually had to, and just being an open book here with the listeners, I had to open up my Letterboxd, which, if you don't know what Letterboxd is, you should follow me on it, that Tyler Hunt. But it's a movie.
Don't worry about following me.
It's a movie and film social network that's pretty awesome. But I had to go through my Letterboxd diary to see what I had watched last that I hadn't talked about on the podcast. So that's a little bit of behind the magic of the Nerd You're Looking For podcast this week.
We're just throwing the word magic around loosey-goosey.
I thought you were going to say we're just throwing shit against the wall, seeing what sticks.
Pretty much.
But in July or early August, I watched a documentary that I was actually going to talk about on the podcast, but then I watched something better and talked about it.
Sure.
But it's a new Netflix documentary. I think that it's still pretty fresh. It's only been out a couple months. It's called What the Health?
I've heard of it. I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, so Netflix is obviously becoming really well known for having all of these documentaries, and now they're kind of producing their own documentaries. And I don't know that this was necessarily produced by them, but I think it's exclusive to Netflix. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But it follows this guy named Kip Anderson, which, if your name is Kip, I already don't trust you. So it follows this guy, and he's interviewing physicians and other individuals regarding diet and health. And it's kind of one of those documentaries, like I think I talked about Fed Up earlier this year, where it really soured me on sugar.
Yeah.
So I didn't cut sugar completely out of my diet, but I definitely cut back on sugar because of that documentary. Very similar to that, except it's very much more like conspiracy. It gets a little crazy at sometimes, the allegations that he's making. So he's basically, it takes a long time to get to the point, as some documentaries do, but he's basically saying that there's a correlation between eating meat and dairy and diabetes. And in that regard, he's saying that there's a conspiracy to cover that fact up because like Tyson and Kraft and these big food companies are sponsors of the American Diabetic Association and like the American I don't know these organizations' names, but like the Heart Organization for America, and like they give them money, so they're like on their websites they have like heart healthy or diabetic friendly recipes that call for meat and dairy, even though there's a correlation between the two. And apparently, I didn't realize this till I kind of started refreshing my memory on the documentary, and I read a couple articles, but it's been criticized by a lot of medical doctors, nutritionists, and journalists. They claim that there's confusion causation, and he basically cherry picks scientific studies throughout the documentary, and he used biased sources that are, of course, going to distort the message a little bit. So basically, the end of this documentary is, so I was kind of on board with it, like, oh wow, this is kind of crazy, but they lost me at the end because he has this group of obese people that he's, are struggling with this and struggling with that and are on the verge of diabetes and so on and so forth. And he presents like these studies to them and they decide to go vegan. And when they go vegan, they lose all this weight, of course, but their diabetes goes away and this and that. And it's basically, when I got to it, it was like, that was basically an hour and a half of a setup to promote going vegan.
Yeah.
And I have no problem with people being vegetarian or people being vegan. Like, it's not my place to judge how other people live their lives. But in that same regard, don't judge me for how I live my life whenever I eat steak and chicken and, all of that good stuff. So I'm curious what the real science is behind it. I don't think that everything presented in this documentary is necessarily unfounded. I'm sure there is a correlation between eating a lot of that stuff and diabetes and cancer and so on and so forth. But I felt like at the end of it, it was just a promotion of being vegan.
Sure. Which
kind of muddied the message for me because it went from being something about health to being about you should live your life this way and only eat these things, which kind of hit me the wrong way. So I would say I recommend this documentary because anything that you watch that's going to help you better understand what you're putting in your body, I think is good. But at the same time, I think the message is muddied a little bit, and it sounds like there might be some gaps in the research that he presents, so it doesn't sound like it's all the way thought through.
So I've talked a lot about this in the last couple of years. I really have gotten into the documentary genre. My wife and I watch quite a few a year, but I always try to take it with a grain of salt because you can take anything and make it sound like, just editing, they shoot so much footage for these films that you can just cut things up and make it look the way that you want it to look. So, there's so many different documentaries that just, I'm watching it and I'm like, what did they actually say here? What is the actual evidence here? Because you could get anybody to say anything pretty much on those documentaries. There's still awesome tools for learning about something or just kind of entertaining yourself. But you just have to understand that going in, that the filmmaker has an agenda. It is true. Some of the stuff that they say is true, don't get me wrong, but they have an agenda just like anybody else making any other kind of film does. So you can cut up all this footage any way you want. So you just have to know that going in and kind of have a critical eye for some of these films. And it sounds like you did when you were watching this one.
Yeah. Whenever people start messing with the meat I eat, that's whenever I get defensive. But talking about conspiracies, This movie was directed by Kip, our boy Kip, but also his co-director was a guy named Keegan Kuhn.
Oh, yeah?
So I don't trust anything you say regarding this documentary.
Yes. I'm secretly vegan. You've known me for 10 years now, and I've ate so much meat.
I wish you would have
all just a log cod.
I wish you would have picked a better fake name than Keegan. No offense.
It's better than Kip. Let's be honest.
Oh, 100%. No, speaking of me knowing that you eat meat, I forgot we did that fucking cheeseburger challenge at one time.
Yeah.
Where you almost threw up.
I did almost throw up. That became, so you beat the cheeseburger challenge, and then I was finishing up, and I was thinking in my brain, I was like, this is going to be the story how we destroyed these cheeseburgers together. And then I immediately felt like I was going to throw up, and I was like, in my brain, I was like, this is a whole different story now. This is where Pat throws up in public.
If you're curious what the cheeseburger challenge was, it was Wayback Burgers, which I think is nationwide, so you've probably heard of it. They have like a 9 patty burger.
Yeah, it's the triple burger.
The triple burger. Pat and I conquered it, which is probably not that impressive whenever you like watch shows like Man vs. Food or whatever, but it was a pretty cool, fun thing to do for sure. If only to eat a 9 patty burger.
I almost sent you something, and this is completely off the rails at this point, but who cares? They actually had a contest recently where they had the triple challenge, and it was like nationwide. And if you could eat it the fastest of anybody, you won like $30,000 or something.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I almost sent it to you, but then I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. Because I figured you would want to like get together and do it again. I was like, nah, I'm not throwing up.
We should do that before I leave for Cleveland for good. That'd be the send off as we get sick on cheeseburgers.
Yeah. So I don't think that this is the message that Kip or Keegan wanted to send. Like, we started talking about their film, and then all of a sudden we were advertising Wayback Burger. I don't think that's the way that they thought that was going to go down.
Yeah, but I mean, now a message from our sponsor, Wayback Burger. So no, yeah, so I don't know. Check that documentary out, but just have a watchful eye. So what are you into, man?
I am into Rick and Morty season 3. You've talked a lot about this season and this show on past episodes, and I mentioned a few episodes ago, the last time you talked about it, that for whatever reason I was just a few episodes behind. I finally got caught up. I have to say, obviously, that I love this season. I don't want to say it's their best season because they're all good. Yeah. So it's kind of hard to pick your favorite one. But so far, I'm really, really loving this season. But I really wanted to talk about the most recent episode of this show. I've already watched it 3 times since it aired on Sunday because it's really, really dense. Yeah. Basically, anytime I had any free time over the course of this week, I watched this episode. It's called the Ricklantis Mix-Up, which is kind of a bait and switch because it really has nothing to do with Rick and Morty. It's really kind of the Tales from the Citadel.
Yeah.
It's a very, very strange episode. I mean, it's a weird episode, just the concept of it and what happens in the episode. But I think it's weird because if it's not the best, it's one of the best episodes of Rick and Morty, and there's actually not Rick and Morty in it in a way. But I mean, it's all Rick and Morty, but not the 2 that we love. So, we almost see none of them in the Rick and Morty that we love in this episode. They're off in Atlantis, apparently getting mermaid puss, which I think is amazing. But, the fact that they just keep saying it over and over, it makes me laugh every time. But the meat and potatoes of this episode is kind of catching up with what's happening at the Citadel. For those that are unfamiliar, the Citadel is basically it's super confusing. The show gets some things are a little bit confusing with the mythology, but basically in the show, and I'm going to go into spoilers, so just bear with me if you're not completely caught up on the show yet. Just look at the show notes and kind of fast forward because I'll definitely talk about some spoilers here. In the show, there's many dimensions, and in those dimensions, there are different Ricks and different Mortys, and the Ricks are hunted by the Galactic Federation. And some Ricks have chosen to create the Citadel to protect themselves. And the Citadel was ruled until recently by the Council of Ricks until Rick C-137 killed them, which is the Rick that the show is based on.
Yeah.
And so the Citadel has finally decided to elect the first president, and that's kind of where we come in. That's where we jump in. And this episode is strange in the sense that for you to properly enjoy how awesome this episode is, I think you definitely have to have a working knowledge of the show, because like I said, the mythology is so thick and kind of gets a little confusing here and there. But I think it's almost the perfect episode. Maybe Total Recall is a little bit better, but if somebody were to ask me that isn't a fan of the show, what episode should I watch? Just so I can kind of get that litmus test. Am I going to like this show? Yeah, I guess you could say the pilot, of course, but I think I would show them this episode because it has everything in it that I like about Rick and Morty. Yeah. It has that silly humor, like the mermaid puss. And there's a couple other jokes here and there that are kind of silly, but it's also very, very heavy. It's super weird, but it's really, really well written. Like the threads are just amazing and they come together really, really well. And like I said, it has that perfect blend of that silly humor, but also very heavy concepts. It's kind of a sci-fi nerd's wet dream because there's a lot of different references and it's just really cool atmosphere. I will say that my only tiny criticism of this episode is the School of Mortys. That thread is not the strongest in this episode. It does play a part towards the third act of this episode. It does kind of bring everything together, but I just wasn't crazy about that particular storyline, but that's a very tiny criticism. I really love this episode quite a lot. It's fantastic.
Yeah, this episode is amazing. It would probably definitely be in a top 5 Rick and Morty episodes if I were to do that for sure. Maybe even like top 3. But it's funny. I was watching it Monday morning at the airport when I was headed to Minnesota, and I was laughing. I must look like a crazy person.
Because of
how hard I was laughing in the airport. I'm surprised that TSA didn't tackle me because it was just an amazing episode.
You weren't actually watching it. Your screen was just blank.
But yeah, like you said, I mean, it's pretty much everything that the series is known for. It's the silly humor and it's the convoluted stuff, the deeper stuff. And as you mentioned, it's really dense and there's a lot to go back and kind of see a second or like you said, even third time around. So definitely an amazing episode. And I think that it's the episodes like this that are the reason that this show took so long to get to season 3, because I think a lot of time and effort is put into making something that good.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, you ready for comics?
Yeah. What'd you read this week?
I read the Harley Quinn 25th anniversary special.
I almost read this book.
Did you?
I did. I almost read it. I did not actually read it.
Don't worry about it. Spoiler alert. So Harley Quinn has become somewhat of a strange character over the last few years, especially in her comics. I mean, of course, she started off as Joker's henchwoman / sidekick / girlfriend. But recently, they've kind of liberated the character for what I assume is a variety of reasons. I mean, young girls love her, and you don't want them to necessarily look up to, the Joker's girlfriend. So to give her her own storylines and her own path, being a strong female character is important, and I get that. So it's important for them to have a role model. And then, of course, she's extremely popular with anybody, not just young girls, and has the ability to stand on her own because she's a deeper character. And you want to look at it from the Batman side of things. The Joker doesn't always necessarily work well with others. So it'd kind of be like she's there and then she's not there for some stories. So it might have been better just to kind of spin her off on her own. So all of that being said, this comic is, as they typically do with the anniversary specials in DC, it's basically like 4 or 5 short stories in one comic written by different authors and illustrated by different artists. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of stories. Most of them are current Harley, which sees her more as kind of like a teeny bop character is what I would mostly explain it as. But a couple of them are definitely throwbacks to the 90s and her origin and the Batman, the animated series, so on and so forth. So that all being said, like I was saying, I get why the character has been reinvented, but it definitely does not make for stories that I can necessarily relate to or appreciate. So I'm not going to run through all of the short stories that are in this comic, but a couple of the ones that I didn't really necessarily, they didn't click with me. There was one where this guy, and I don't know who he was supposed to be, but him and Harley are on like a stakeout, and he's asking her about, they play Truth or Dare, And she says, "No dares, because I know what you'll dare me to do," which...
blow him.
Yeah, exactly. So there was that joke. But he asked her about some trip to Vegas she took with not Harley Quinn, with Catwoman and Poison Ivy. And she recounts this like long story about her and those two going to Vegas. And of course, hijinks happen, but it's basically, it reminded me of a movie, like a weird superhero twist on a movie like Rough Night or something like that, where it's a girl's trip to Vegas, or like a girl version of The Hangover, maybe. You know, they have this crazy party and whatever else, and that's all fine and good. But these are Batman villains. Like, I don't want to see them going on a road trip to Vegas. It's just,
that's weird.
It felt really, really strange to me. And last week, for what I was into, I talked about Batman and Harley Quinn. And I talked about one of the most cringeworthy parts of that comic was when Harley farts multiple times. Or it wasn't a comic, it's a movie. But in this book, she makes a poop joke about her having to take a shit. And again, I don't necessarily need that from Harley Quinn. So that was a bit disappointing. And that whole story played off really weird. There was another one where Harley Quinn, it's her birthday, and she's recounting like all the bad birthdays she's had. And she talks about how awful her birthday always is, and the Joker's putting together this group of villains to do some heist, and I guess Poison Ivy ends up poisoning him and won't give him the antidote. She basically blackmails him into throwing a surprise party for Harley. So Harley doesn't know that, and she goes and they have a surprise party, and Killer Croc gives her a big hug, and it's really fucking weird. It's weird because this is the same universe that the crazy dark stuff is happening in Batman or Metal or the other things that we've talked about. And in this comic, Joker's throwing a surprise party for Harley. So I don't think that it's necessarily a bad comic. It's just not intended for people like me. I think it's more like younger girls, like I was saying, or something along those lines. There was one story in it that I really liked, and it involved Robin and Batman stopping Harley and Joker from doing this thing where they were going to release this gas where the whole town falls asleep. So they could, I guess, I don't know, do whatever. Steal
it's called a roofie.
Yeah. Like a gas roofie. And it was definitely a throwback to the animated series, both in the style it was drawn and kind of like the storyline. And Batman and Joker go at it, and they both send their sidekicks to fight each other, and they're both hesitant to. Robin wants to go after Joker, and Harley thinks she's better than Robin. So they fight, and Harley gets a one-up on Robin, and she ends up having like a cool character moment where she decides to stop the bomb from going off and play it off like Robin did it, and it's kind of like her conscience and where the character's at right now, where she's more of a anti-hero than a villain. So that story wasn't too bad, but I don't know. Overall, I don't think that this comic gives a very good representation of her first 25 years. So that was disappointing. I don't know that I expected anything else, though. So I would not recommend this comic unless you're into the newer Harley Quinn.
Yeah, that's disappointing. I think they could have gone a lot of different routes, and it doesn't sound like the route that they went down doesn't sound like it was very interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't. So what did you read?
So I read Runaways, #1. They just started a new run of this particular comic. For those that don't know, Runaways is a group of superpowered children, or I guess younger people. I don't know. Children it's weird. It sounds like they're toddlers. No, they're like younger people, because I'm an old person now, that discover that their parents are supervillains and decide to run away from them, hence the title. I've always heard really, really good things about this comic. I'm kind of a sucker for these types of stories, how being a superhero or a supervillain kind of affects that person's personal life.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I gravitated to Spider-Man a long time ago, and he became my favorite character because he was that vulnerable superhero. So I'm always a sucker for those types of stories. Unfortunately, by the time I got back into comics years ago, before we started this podcast, they were already several issues into this book, and I just kind of never circled back around to it. And I was pretty excited when I saw that they were relaunching this book before the TV show comes out. I want to get it out of the way that I don't think that this book is bad by any means, but I actually think it's the opposite. I think that a lot of people are going to be very satisfied with this book. But like you talked about with your comic, not kind of being for you, I think the exact same way about Runaways #1, because I expected it to be something that would bring more people into the comic, especially considering the TV show is about to happen.
Yeah.
It just wasn't meant for me. It wasn't a relaunch. It was just kind of a continuation of the story that they have already established, which seems odd to me. It seems like you would want to bring as many new people into the fold as possible before the TV show, but that's obviously not the route that they decided to take, at least not with the first issue. Again, it's not bad. It just didn't capture my attention because it wasn't what I expected and it wasn't what I necessarily wanted. I wanted that relaunch. I wanted them to kind of bring me up to speed, and that's not what they did at all. Again, I think it could be a really satisfying, and I think it will be a really satisfying story for longtime readers. I just didn't get it. Like, I mean, I felt like, I mean, I obviously missed issues and issues of stuff, and just like, oh, I got dropped in the 3rd season of a TV show and I'm trying to figure out what's going on right now. You do learn the fate of one of the Runaways. So I'll leave it at that. So, I mean, I do think, like I said, for longtime readers, it'll be a satisfying story. I was just like, what the hell is going on right now? Because it's literally, they just drop you into what's happening in this story, and I have no idea. So it definitely just wasn't meant for me. It's not a bad book by any means. There was actually some really cool moments. And I think, again, if I had known the characters and I had known the story, it would have been a really satisfying book, but it just wasn't meant for me.
Yeah, I mean, this book wasn't even on my radar. And whenever they announced, I think they announced Runaways as a movie at one point, and then they kind of reneged on it, and they did it as a show, obviously, like you were mentioning, and neither time was I ever interested. So
sure,
definitely not picking this up, especially with what you had to say about it.
Yeah, for sure. So are you ready for nerd news?
Yeah, I am so ready. I was fucking born ready.
You're Googling stuff right now, are you?
No. So the big news this week is kind of related, or not kind of, it is directly related to our big news from last week. And that is that J.J. Abrams is going to direct Star Wars Episode 9. He's coming back to fill in for Colin Trevorrow. So not only is that a piece of news, but it's also been pushed back. So it was originally going to release in May of 2019, and it's going to stick with the December theme of Episode 7 and 8.
Why do they keep doing that?
I don't know. They seemed really gung-ho about this movie coming out in May, just like they seem really gung-ho about Han Solo coming out next May. I wouldn't be surprised if that one gets pushed back too. I guess it kind of depends on how Ron Howard's doing. But yeah, Episode 9, I guess, you wouldn't think this early in production that the director leaving would cause it to be that far, or to need to be pushed back that far.
Sure.
But maybe it was a JJ choice where he wants more time to make sure he ends this trilogy correctly.
Well, maybe because there was, I guess, I don't want to say there's creative differences. That's why the original director left. He got fired because it sounds like he was an asshole, but maybe there was a few things that they wanted to change and they didn't think they had enough time to do that, and still make that release date. I will say for the first part of that news, I feel conflicted because I don't want to say that I'm disappointed, because obviously he's going to do a great job. He's already done a great job with The Force Awakens. So I have faith that he's going to do a good job. He's one of my favorite directors, but I really liked the avenue that they were going, and to kind of double up on somebody. And we kind of touched on this a little bit last week. I just think it was kind of cool that they were picking these, I wouldn't say up and coming guys, because Rian Johnson's been doing movies for a long time and JJ had been established for a long time. He'd already done the Star Trek franchise. So I wouldn't say they're necessarily up and comers. It just, they were picking some really cool people to do these movies, and then just to double up on somebody that had already done a movie seems weird.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all in for it. I was psyched when I saw it, just because obviously I'm a big fan of Episode 7, and I'm a big fan of most of the things that he's done. So I'd rather Star Wars be in good hands than them saying, "Hey, let's just give it to this," like you said, quote unquote, up and comer. So it doesn't seem like they've had a lot of luck with that. With
Phil
Lord and Chris Miller and
Josh
Trank, and who else am I missing here? I mean, Gareth Edwards kind of. he got all the credit for Rogue One, but it sounds like there was some drama in that production. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm good with JJ for sure. So let's see. Did you see the new picture of David Harbour as Hellboy?
I did. It was weird because we were watching Stranger Things
Oh, yeah.
while I saw it. And so I showed my wife and she's like, she didn't even know that they were remaking it, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
I think it looks cool.
Yeah.
I think it looks a little bit grittier, which would make sense because they're going the R-rated route.
Yeah.
He has the scars and stuff like that. Like the Ron Perlman one was just kind of like, I mean, he was cut, but he didn't have the scars and stuff like that. So I think they're definitely going a grittier route, which could be cool. I'm not at all attached to the characters, so it didn't really affect me all that much, but I think it looks cool.
Yeah, I'm not all attached to the character either. I mean, I'm indifferent to this movie. Obviously, I hope it's good, and we'll see it, and I'm sure we'll review it. That being said, I thought it's like that looks exactly like Ron Perlman did.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't change that character.
Yeah, I know.
too
I mean,
much.
it's hard. I mean, you could say that like all the Batmans look the same. Yeah, because it's an iconic suit. But I mean, there's like nothing different. So
I mean, there's the scars.
that's not enough. But
I mean,
know.
what did you
I don't
want though?
I wanted him to be blue.
Okay, that would be a weird choice.
I just thought that it'd be cool. No, I don't know. I don't know what I wanted. I mean, they can do whatever the fuck they want. I could give two shits just trying to make conversation.
Isn't it so awesome when we can talk about something that we don't care about? Because I'm being serious and we've talked about this before, but yeah, it would be really awesome if this movie was awesome, but I don't care if it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
That's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, especially with something that is like a nerdy property. So
yeah, I mean, it will be really cool. I think they could do something really cool. I just don't care if they don't.
Well, it's like the stuff that you and I love. We've been burned a lot of times before.
for sure.
So it's nice whenever a movie like Ghost in the Shell comes out and it's really awful and we don't give a shit because we don't know the source material. Whereas it seems like everybody that did love the source material was, just irate. So, so I'm glad that a movie like Ghost in the Shell did not make me irate. So same thing with Hellboy. Hey, whatever, man. Let's see. This one I just actually read, and it kind of caught me off guard a little bit because I would have never expected this. Jamie Lee Curtis is going to come back as Laurie Strode in the Halloween, I guess you'd call it a reboot, the movie that Danny McBride is doing with his writing partner that will come out in, I think, October 2018.
David Gordon Green, right? Is that his name? David Green Gordon. He's got 3 names.
Yep, David Gordon Green. He's directing from a script that he co-wrote with Danny McBride. Here's what bothers. I'm really excited for this movie because, like, John Carpenter's an executive producer. He might even score it, which is big because he doesn't do much anymore.
Yeah,
and for him to come back to Halloween is huge. And it's going to apparently ignore like all the sequels and just be a sequel to the first and the second one. But my problem with that is they kind of did that with H2O.
Yep.
And they brought Jamie Lee Curtis back as Laurie Strode. And then she wanted a definitive ending, which is why her character dies in Halloween Resurrection at the very beginning of the film. So, obviously time goes on and people need to pay their mortgage and so on and so forth. But, when did H2O come out? Probably like 2000?
I would assume.
A while ago. So, 17 years passed and she's willing to come back as a character. I guess that's not too big of a stretch, but it's just vaguely familiar.
What else does she have to do? Those weird yogurt commercials?
Yeah, Activia. But what's cool is that Blumhouse Productions is one of the producers on it, and then they have a pretty good track record with horror movies. So I'm definitely in for it. I was excited for it before they announced she was coming back, but I'm kind of curious to see what route they go. The one thing that I will say in the article I read that again makes me roll my eyes pretty hard is Universal Pictures also set October 19th, 2018 as the release date for what it's calling the final film in the Halloween series. No fucking way. Like, if this movie makes a little bit of money, they will keep going with these.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I hate when studios do that. Why would you even do that to yourself? You're telling me that in the rest of time, you will never do a Halloween movie that revisits Michael Myers.
I hate I hate when they put like the final chapter or something like that. You know they're gonna make another one of these.
Don't like the same thing with Saw. Saw did like 8 or 9 movies, and you know that last one was the final chapter or whatever. And there's a new fucking Saw movie coming out,
but it's not called Saw. It's called Jigsaw.
All right, so the next one won't be called Halloween; it'll be called All Hallows Eve or some shit. So I don't know, man. I have mixed feelings on it. I really, really, like I said, hate whenever they say this is the last movie, because obviously it's not. So
for sure.
All right. Last thing is just a release date. So John Wick 3 is not only confirmed, but it will be released in May of 2019. So that's
cool. Yeah. I mean, I'm excited to see where they take that movie, because I guess that was all that they were planning on doing is just 3. So that's kind of cool. I like to see how it ends. If that fucking dog dies though, man, I'm done. I'm out.
How many dogs can you kill on a trilogy before people give up on you?
2. You kill a second one, you're done.
All right, man. You ready for our main topic?
I don't think so.
This is gonna be a struggle. Spoiler alert.
Yes. So I struggled with names last week. I'm definitely gonna struggle again this week. So we're gonna review Mother. And I don't know if you could hear the exclamation point in my voice when I tried to say it. That's douchey, by the way. That's the first strike right there. Anyways, this movie was written and directed by Darren Aronofsky.
Jesus Christ, man. He is like a well-known director.
I'm terrible with names. I don't know why.
Aronofsky.
I
think the F is silent.
I'm going to keep saying it. I'm going to stop trying. I'm going to actively try not to say it from now on. I gave it one shot. And that's all I'm required to do.
All right.
So he is a filmmaker behind Requiem for a Dream, Black Swan, you know, those big blockbuster popcorn movies. I was actually moderately excited for this film.
Yeah.
He has a certain style about him. He definitely has he's an acquired taste. I liked Black Swan. I wasn't absolutely blown away by it like most people. I was actually, and I know that you're going to disagree with me on this one, but I was pretty underwhelmed by The Wrestler. I know that you like that film quite a lot.
Yeah, I goddamn love The Wrestler.
I never got it. Never got the love for that movie. However, I kind of love the fact that I knew nothing about this movie going in.
Yeah.
Because it's really rare. They did a really good job of kind of getting people excited for this movie, but not telling us anything about it, which I think is very, very cool. It's very rare especially for us that are obsessed with movies, to not know anything about it going in. And that is basically the end of the notes that I prepped, because we literally just saw this and I have not gotten anything together other than that.
So. Yeah, like you said, you and I literally just finished watching it, so this is going to be a very, very fresh review.
Unfortunately,
and I don't mean fresh in Rotten Tomatoes terms, at least on my end. I was also excited for this movie. I'll be honest, I did not know it existed until I saw it in front of the trailer for it in front of it last week.
Okay.
That being said, I do like most of what Darren Aronofsky does. And I thought that the trailer for this movie was fantastic because it's very simple. And then it has a bunch of words just flash at you about how you're going to remember where you were when you saw this movie. And this movie is crazy and you're going to be fucked up for life and so on and so forth. So I was pretty excited. I mean, it looked like a horror movie and it looked like it was going to be a real mindfuck. And while it kind of was a mindfuck, it was not not in a good way.
Yeah, so let's just dive right in. So we start off these reviews by kind of just giving a general overview. We call it broad strokes. So going back to that trailer, I think I will remember watching this movie.
Yeah.
I think I'll have PTSD. It's like you said, it's not a mindfuck in a good way. Like
No.
it wasn't like one of those movies that I'm just like it came all together and at the end and I'm just like, oh my God, this was powerful and amazing. No, it was just fucking weird. And it was weird in such a strange way, because it was a slow burn, pretty much 90% of the way through the movie, and then all of a sudden it just fucking is batshit crazy. The last like 20 minutes of this movie is insane for no fucking reason.
No, it doesn't make any logical sense.
It's just oh my god. There's a face that Jennifer Lawrence makes through most of this movie. It's a mixture of confusion,
constipation.
She's scared. There's a little of make this stop kind of mixed in there. And I feel like that if you could have put a mirror up against my face watching this movie, I would just be making the same face, because I was just like I was curious, but also very confused, and I wanted to stop so badly.
Yeah.
I wanted this movie to be over so many times. It is the worst version of Groundhog's Day I've ever seen, which I guess that could technically be skewed as a spoiler, but don't see this movie.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm right there in the same boat with you. It is not good, and my wife wanted to kind of see this, but it didn't work out where she could go see it with us. But when I got out of the movie, she texted me and asked how it was, and I told her it was terrible, and that very, very rarely is a movie so bad that it pisses me off.
Yeah.
And this movie, I don't know why. I don't know what it is about it, and maybe it'll come out as we kind of talk about it and review it, but it pissed me off. Like, I was angry after I saw this movie. Usually you and I, when we see movies together, especially movies we're going to review, we have a poker face. Sure. Because we want our first impressions.
It was really hard.
We want our first impressions to be on the podcast, so it's a genuine conversation, but I couldn't hold it in. Like, I had to let it be known how pissed off I was about this movie, even just a little bit. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the movie. It's too artistic for its own good. It's not entertaining at all. It's just he tried to do something off the wall and it didn't work.
I feel like, I mean, he hasn't really made a big movie. I mean, he had Noah, I guess. Well, you could say
which is another fucking weird movie for this guy to do.
Yeah, I don't know. I never saw that movie, so I don't know. But I mean, that would be the only movie that I kind of pointed to when I was looking at his filmography that was like, okay, well, that's kind of a blockbuster type of movie. I mean, it's a bigger movie. I don't think it did very well at the box office or anything like that, but he doesn't really do huge movies. And this was I felt like this was not necessarily a fuck you to movies or like the big blockbusters or anything like that. But I feel like it was almost, and maybe this is what he was going for, like a fuck you to like fame in general. And I'm like, dude, you're not that famous. Like, I mean, you're more famous than I am, but
the only thing I could think whenever I was trying to piece that together too was that he's dating Jennifer Lawrence. So maybe he's saying it from the perspective of being on by her side.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
But yeah, so at the end of the day, we're getting ready to shit on this movie even more, but what does he care, man? He gets to go home to Jennifer Lawrence, so.
Yeah, but I did get to see a little nip.
And there was a little I wonder how if you're the director of a movie and you cast your girlfriend in it, I wonder how you present that to her. Like, I think it's really going to be like of artistic integrity in this scene for us to see your titties.
But it was real nice.
No, it wasn't. She's like brutally getting beat in that scene.
I regret nothing. Anyways, so let's just dive right into the story. So this movie, every time that I thought, because it's a really, really slow burn, like especially at the beginning, it's very mysterious. You have no idea where they're going with it. And every time that I thought, not necessarily knew where I thought it was going, but I was like, okay, here's the story. Because there's nothing at the beginning. The first, I would say 30 minutes of it, it's just her walking around the house. Yep. I mean, there's very, very little, and you kind of get this weird vibe with the house, and she's recreating the house, like, but you don't really know what's happening. And then this couple comes, which I forgot to give my synopsis, but that's beside the point. This couple comes and I'm like, okay, they're fucking weirdos. Like something weird's going to happen. But then there's still this creepy aspect with the house. I was like, oh, so is it a horror movie with the house? Like every time that I thought I knew where this movie was going and what story it was going to try to tell, it got completely away from that. And that can be good in a sense, but where it decided to go was just insane and it didn't do anything. So, I mean, I think they meandered for, an hour and a half, and then the means to the end was just, I mean, it was horrible.
Yeah, so it's definitely a tale of two movies. Like the first half of this movie made more sense for sure.
Oh yeah.
Whenever like Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer come to the house and things get uncomfortable, and that's where I thought the movie was headed.
Yeah, exactly.
But then that storyline kind of ends and picks up with this batshit crazy storyline that to me makes no sense.
Yeah.
Like even with, I mean, there is kind of a revelation that comes at the end of the movie that of course we won't spoil, but even with that knowledge, I like retracing the story points throughout the film. I don't get it. There's so much stuff that's not touched on again.
Yep.
Like there's this weird tension between Jennifer Lawrence's character and Michelle Pfeiffer's character, and that's never explored. Ed Harris's character is sick, and at one point it's, I guess, insinuated that he threw up some kind of weird creature.
I forgot about that.
Which is never touched on or explained, and maybe I'm missing some kind of relationship to that and what he was. I don't want to spoil what this movie is actually about, but what Darren Aronofsky was going for. But if I have to put that much thought into why Ed Harris threw up what looked like a sea creature or something, then you didn't fucking nail it.
You
home,
didn't do
man.
your job.
You didn't do your job. Like I get movies that make you think, but don't be a lazy storyteller. Like, you know, you got to put some of the points out there.
Yeah.
And I felt like this was just a hodgepodge of weird moments, and I don't know what the point is, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so it had this moment where I thought, okay, it's going to be like Get Out. Not the third act of that movie where it gets really weird. I mean, weird in a good way, not weird in a mother way.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be that type of movie,
For
like
sure.
She's the crazy one. Well, like, why doesn't anybody understand? Like, these people are weird. We should get them out of our house. Sort of that type of movie. Like, I'm the only sane one. Everybody else is crazy. I think that was done somewhat effectively in this movie. But the rest of it, like you said, there's just so many things. What the fuck with the house? Like, was the house living? Was that an allegory to their relationship? Or like, I mean, what was that? There was so many different little tiny threads, and like I said, the ending was so weird. And was all of that actually happening?
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
I mean, I said it in my broad strokes, and I'm going to say it again here because it definitely applies to the story the most. It was too artistic for its own good. I get Black Swan. Like, Black Swan goes off the rails, but it makes sense because it's about this ballerina kind of losing her mind and going crazy. And it tells not linear story, but it tells a story that's you can follow what's happening and why it's happening. This movie, shit just happens for no reason. Like I said, I will give it the benefit that the tension in the first half of the film had me interested. Like my interest was piqued and I wanted to know where this was going, but it just completely loses you. And you know, I'm sure there are people that love this movie. I think that it has a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes right now, but you can't sit there and tell you. I don't know. I almost think that people who love this movie
are movie hipsters.
Yes, movie hipsters love this movie, or people that think that they're so intelligent because they get Mother. Yeah. No, you don't fucking get Mother because it's bullshit.
There's nothing to get.
There's nothing to get. It's bullshit.
So, I think every film major in college is going to love this movie.
God,
because
they're going to show
they
this
feel
every
like
semester.
They have to love this movie.
Exactly.
You don't. It sucked.
That's the thing is, and I'll be honest with you, when I got out of it, I was kind of scared. I was like, am I missing something? Am I a bad moviegoer as much as I say I love movies? Should I love this movie? But no, you don't have to love this movie because it's horseshit.
I keep thinking to myself, do I want it to make sense because it's him? Am I giving him more of the benefit of the doubt than he deserves?
Exactly.
And I feel like people are, if it was anybody else, they'd be like, this is a batshit crazy movie. Don't watch it. But because it's him, it's art.
Yeah, if it was a movie directed by some no-name.
Exactly.
For sure.
But because he's done Black Swan and he's done The Wrestler, he has that long leash, and everybody's like, oh, well, he must be making this grand point, this artistic expression, whatever garbage you want to spew out. people are just giving him the benefit of the doubt because of who he is. Apparently he's dating Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah. If this movie gets nominated for any Oscars, I will riot. Because that would mean that the entire Academy is under that spell of, oh, it's crazy and it's not linear, so that must mean that it's artistic and that he has some great point through this 2-hour bullshit story. But whenever it's just not done well. If there's a point in there, it wasn't done well.
I think that there's, like I said, the only thing that I can make sense is that he's saying something about fame and how it like consumes you.
I think that there's fame, and I think that there's a lot of religion in there as well.
Sure.
And which makes me curious what his religious beliefs are, since he's kind of has something to say about that in this movie, and then also he did Noah. Yeah, which again I haven't seen, but I just would assume it's a straightforward adaptation of the biblical story. So either way, not done well.
So performances, I actually think that everybody kind of did pretty well. I mean, Jennifer Lawrence wasn't her best. I think people are, again, because it's Jennifer Lawrence, I think people are saying, oh, this is her best performance since whatever. And I don't think she was that great. I mean, I didn't think she was bad. There was a whole lot of her walking around and looking confused at everybody.
80% of the movie is a close-up on her face just being, like you said, confused, constipated, whatever. So, I agree with you. Nobody did a bad job. I thought Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer were great as well.
Yeah.
And Javier Bardem played kind of like a creepy guy pretty fantastically. But unfortunately, you can have the best actors in the world, but if it's a shit story, it doesn't make much difference.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's really nothing else to talk about with this movie. I don't know.
How about this? There are a lot of extras in the movie. How do you feel like they were?
I mean, I guess they were all right. I mean,
they took direction well.
at the point that we got to them, I was just like, I could care less about this movie.
Yeah.
And I was very confused because I was like, oh, is this really happening? Because I don't know. It was a lot of nonsense the last like 30 minutes.
That there was.
So I think this might be officially our shortest review.
Yeah, so you don't have like I don't know what usually we do like action or horror or something like that.
I mean, there was really nothing. If you want to keep bashing the third act, we could sit here and bash it for a little bit.
I don't want to spoil it for people because I know there is a lot of interest in this movie, but for the love of Christ, take our word for it. It's not worth your time. Go see it again.
Yeah, for sure. So star rating.
Oh man, I went into the review saying a 2. I'm really tempted to go lower than that. Man, that's tough. I'm gonna say 1.5.
I'm gonna stick with my guns with 2. I do think, especially in that first 30 minutes or so, there's enough there, and there's enough mystery and intrigue in there that I'm just like, okay, yeah, that's a well. I mean, he obviously knows how to move the camera. He knows how to direct actors because the performances are really good. So it's not a shit movie. It's just that last little bit.
Yeah, I see. So I think I've given one other movie this year 1.5, and it was The Circle. And I would watch The Circle again over this movie again.
Oh no. I will never, ever.
No, they're both shit movies, but I think I would get more enjoyment out of The Circle again than this movie.
That's tough. I really hate that movie so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's awful. It's terrible. I can only watch Bill Paxton shit his pants so many times. But yeah, that was, we haven't shit on a movie like that in quite a while. I guess probably since The Circle.
Bad. It was, so bad.
Very, 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 very bad.
Yes. All right. So, we end each episode with a nerd favorite. Luckily, we do that so we can kind of have a palate cleanser from that shit movie. But since we've been talking a lot about Star Wars directors and stuff like that, instead of just doing a generic nerd favorite like we normally do, which is we'll change up the topic, but what your favorite, whatever the topic is, I decided to change it up a little bit. And what director would you like to see do a Star Wars film?
Okay.
Since I'm the one posing the question, I'll give you a few minutes to think about your answer. My answer, I don't think he would ever do it. He hasn't done a big movie yet, but I really like Jeremy and I'm not going to say his name right. I'm just going to go for it. Saul Ye. Okay. He did Blue Ruin and The Green Room or Green Room. Like I said, I doubt he would ever do it. He seems pretty content doing those indie films, and he does a fantastic job with them. But I think, especially a movie, like I think I would have really enjoyed, not that I didn't really enjoy Rogue One. I love that movie. But I think that he could do a really gritty Star Wars movie. Like, I think that would have been a perfect story for him to do.
Okay. He kind of seems like the prime person that would go after for a Star Wars movie too, at least a few years ago. Maybe not anymore, but
yeah.
My choice is Darren Aronofsky.
Are you serious?
I am not serious at all.
I was like, podcast over. We're done.
No, so I'm going to say Taika Waititi.
Okay.
So obviously he's getting his feet wet with a big blockbuster with Thor Ragnarok, which comes out in November. So maybe that will be the tell sign if I'm right in my wish, if that movie is good or not. But I think that he could bring just a little bit of quirkiness to a movie. Maybe not like Episode 9, but maybe like a spin-off movie. I think that he has a really cool artistic direction, and I love the movies he's done, and he would be able to bring the humor to Star Wars. I hesitate with that because it sounds like that's why Phil Lord and Chris Miller were fired, was because they basically made an improv Han Solo movie. So
yeah,
he'd have to rein it in a little bit, but I think that his humor and his direction would mesh well with a Star Wars side movie.
Yeah, and I don't want to kind of jump to conclusions because obviously I have no information whatsoever, but I mean, Marvel is owned by Disney.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there might be some connection there. So, from what we understand, the problem has been, well, the problems with Josh Trank and Colin, what's his name? I mean, it sounds like they were just assholes, but there's been some creative differences and kind of pushback with certain directors, and maybe the higher ups in Disney there's some overlap there.
Yeah.
So if he can do a Marvel movie, now we have no idea if he enjoyed doing it or not.
Yeah.
All reports are that he did, but I mean, we never know behind the scenes. Maybe that would help kind of grease the wheels a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, if it was between doing that though and the spin-off What We Do in the Shadows movie about the werewolves, I'd much rather see the werewolf movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But who knows where that is on his list of projects.
As much as we love Star Wars, there's not another person that can make the werewolf movie.
Yeah.
There's somebody else that can make the Star Wars movie.
Absolutely, man.
All right, so that's it for, I think it's episode 157?
Yeah,
maybe.
sounds right.
Yep. The Nerds You're Looking For podcast. As always, we'd appreciate if you subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use, we're on it. You can also check out our website, thenerdspodcast.com. Comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out our Twitch channel. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, both at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. And you can email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. Finally, vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt.
we are The Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.